Well, we pay for a lot of surveys. We usually do pay for them. They're not free.
I did not pay.
Late.
If you could find a free one, let me know.
It was,
We should have, we have
it was
two good candidates, I feel like,
They had
asking,
a
do you really
full
want to do?
display at the library, and it was really well done, whoever did it, and I can't find the name of the person who did it. But it was,
DCI survey?
what?
The DCI?
DCI was 2015,
Yeah, that was when that survey was first.
but, yeah, but that's kind of a different type of,
Community profile?
This was more of a community type survey of what,
I think it's the same.
maybe same one, but I don't think they did two in the same year, because it went on for
No.
like 2 weeks.
typically the master plan is a survey that you'd be looking for those goals and, because they adopt a master plan, they don't adopt the DCI survey, just so you're aware.
Community input.
Come on, Chris.
Oh, it is.
You can still have opportunities, you just
Yeah,
can't
must have been
have any
Mark's
action,
or
right?
something.
Don't you have to have a quorum?
All the questions they
That's
asked.
my,
Yep. So you can get as far as that, and then you're.
I did talk to Chris
I
yesterday.
feel like you can still have these.
Planned to be here, so.
She's
But you
usually
can approve.
about,
Right, it's just for public information.
she's usually
And
about,
then nothing on the action agenda.
about after the Pledge of Allegiance, usually she's here.
Chris is a member. Text her.
Sorry, guys, we're just waiting on one more member to make a quorum. We still might be able to go forward. We just won't be able to do any action items on the agenda tonight because we won't have a quorum to vote on it.
She's not on there, is she?
Mm.
I talked to her yesterday, she came by. She was planning to be here.
Okay.
I'll do as you say.
So if a vote can't be taken, why do we even get up to present it? Do we
Just-
have to go through this process again?
Just for public information and
So do we have to wait till next month, or will there be a special session?
We're hoping Chris is here.
yeah.
That's what we planned on.
You wanna give us the address, we'll go get her.
I'm texting her right now.
Can those of you on Zoom hear us? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear us. All right, thank you.
How's the dog?
Totally.
The dog? Which dog?
She says she's
The dog-
She's on her way.
the dog's sitting
I think I can go ahead and start it going and let her roll in. Go.
Be disruptive.
there.
Across the,
Oh, there we go. Welcome. All right, I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Vice Chairperson Gadd,
Here.
Commissioner Nelson. It's, Commissioner O'Shea Heidinger,
Here.
Trustee Luke, Mayor Tarkington,
Here.
Chairperson Nyberg,
Here.
4 present, 2 absent.
All right, will everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, the next portion is general public input, limited to 10 minutes, but if you're already on tonight's agenda, we would ask that you speak then. All right, seeing no general public input, we'll move on to Planning Commission disclose conflicts of interest. Anyone? All right. And then I would look for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Vice Chairperson Gadd,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Shea Heidinger,
Yes.
Mayor Tarkington,
Yes.
Chairperson Nyberg,
Yes,
all in favor.
thank you. Moving on to our public hearing agenda, 2022-4 Marlin Village PUD preliminary plan.
Good evening. I'm Nicole Killian, the Community Development Director. And this is a request from Mark and Linda Head for the Marlin Village PUD preliminary plan. This project is located on Bayfield Parkway and 509. It was recently annexed into the town of Bayfield. The planning process, I did give a little more detail on the planning process because I know we're going to have new members on the board. So what it's gone through, but they've gone through a comprehensive plan amendment, annexation and initial zoning, and sketch plan. So tonight they're in front of Planning Commission for their preliminary plan. And then they do have one more step still, their final plan, which just goes to the Board of Trustees. So if it's approved tonight at the Planning Commission level, this will be the last time you see this plan. Preliminary versus final. Preliminary is where we start to do the technical review. So we've had a lot of technical agency responses that we provide back to the applicant and put into our staff report. And from there, they do further refinements, and the final plan will include final reports, final plans, and then we start getting into documents like we do a PUD guide agreement as well as a subdivision improvement agreement. So we get into those more technical final documents at the final plan stage. This project is, again, for 15 space tiny home village. They're going to remain under the head's ownership. Right now, most of the spaces are 40 foot by 25. There's one that's a little bit smaller just because of its location to the King Ditch. There'll be owner-occupied tiny homes with covered storage, required skirting around each unit, 2 parking spaces each with 5 additional guest spaces. They're going to propose xeriscaping for their landscaping. They're going to provide a roughly 1,000 square foot community garden and a pavilion with tables and grills. And I did provide larger prints for you all to see of the site plan. And it just kind of shows the layout of the 15 tiny home spaces. And then they have a 3-dimensional plan. And then just the possible motions. So keeping it simple. You guys have seen this a few times, but if you have any specific questions, I can answer those right now. And then I know the applicants are also present.
Thank you, ma'am.
I did want to point one thing out real quick. Geotech reports, usually we have them by now, but they're all running behind region-wide. And so we're conditioning all our projects right now on geotech reports. And so you'll hear this for all of them. And what we're going to do is we won't issue any permits for building or any permits to do infrastructure until we get those geotech reports and see what the mitigation requirements will be based on soil types. So those will be coming. We won't issue, like I said, any of those final permits until we get them, but region-wide, we're seeing them being held up.
Thank you, ma'am. Would the heads like to add anything else to that?
Good evening. My name's Steve Pavlik. I'm with PST Engineering, 3520 Bennett Street, Durango, Colorado. I'm the civil engineering consultant on the project, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Mark and Linda are here as well. We did not prepare a formal presentation just because it's been through the so many meetings, but we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
No, I appreciate that. I just always like to give them the opportunity if anything has come up to, they can address it as well, but thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Does the board have any questions?
Are we going through the entire, all the stuff in the packet, or we've been through this enough? So I had a concern about, there was mention in the documents that there was a concern about flood hazard, and there was one, I think one unit that was, there was concern about flooding, and the response from the heads was that they're on wheels and they can be moved, but they're all going to be skirted.
Is this in reference to the King Ditch?
I think so.
So I think the main thing there was, and I've talked to the King Ditch's attorney as well as the president, and their main concern is just being able to access the King Ditch when they need to do maintenance to it. And so I think they've worked out a plan with the heads where they won't be locating any of those units within that easement area, so that they can get equipment in there when they need to.
I think, I read this a couple of days ago.
But they're,
so-
in terms of the floodplain, they're above the floodplain area. Half of their lot is in the floodplain, but they're putting these tiny homes on the upper bench portion of it. Steve can, sure.
Commissioner Heidinger is correct. There is a reference, I think, in the ditch company attorney's comments about flooding. I think so the whole property that's being developed is outside of the floodplain. They said there is a potential issue where the ditch goes under County Road 509, and sometimes there is flooding there, they said. So there would be one unit kind of where the water might run through, but I think the concern generally is that the King Ditch doesn't want to be responsible for like flooding issues to a building.
Right.
But since this is going to sit up off the ground, you know, they sit off about 12 inches or maybe even 18 inches off the ground. I think in this case, it's a ditch. It's not the river that's actually flooding. It's because there might be a backup in the culvert. So I think the flood water might be, you know, 5 inches deep or 6 inches deep. I think it would just flow
Yeah,
under the unit.
It was on page 11, the potential for flooding of Unit 10 in the storage area. Flooding could cause damage to tiny homes or storage units. The owners indicated that flooding is not a concern because the tiny homes will be on wheels and can be moved. And that was kind of my concern, is if there's flooding coming, it's kind of hard to take the skirting off and get that unit moved.
Sure. I think, again, I just think because the tiny home is elevated, you know, if the floor of the tiny home is elevated because they're sitting on wheels, I think the flood water, it's not a huge event like if the Los Pinos River flooded, obviously you wouldn't want anybody in that flood path, but if some water spilled over the bank, I think it would flow under a tiny home. I don't think it would be a big issue for a tiny home. And if they had to do some repairs, they could slide the unit out, do whatever repairs need to be done, and then put it back.
What about potential harm to the storage unit? Because that's not going to be movable. It's going to be stationary.
Right, the storage unit could be built up a few inches off the ground. And doesn't necessarily even have to have a permanent foundation. It could be built on blocks or that sort of thing. So again, I think we could elevate that off the ground a bit to keep that flooding issue from being a concern.
Okay.
So it sounds like the King Ditch is concerned, like you said, you know, if there is a flooding event, that can be moved and there can be repairs done, but who's responsible for paying for those repairs? And moving these, I imagine, is not the easiest thing. It's not like moving a trailer.
Right, I mean, they do have a hitch, and it is fairly straightforward, as long as, you know, depending on how they pull them in. The storage unit would be a little bit more difficult. I think I assume the property owner is taking the risk because the ditch has said that there is potential issues and the flooding, you know, could come through there. So I think the storage units would be the responsibility of the heads to repair. The ditch embankment itself, I would assume, would be the ditch company, because that hasn't changed. Based on their easement, they want us to be 20 feet away from the access road. So any damage to their access road or the embankment is based on their culvert overflowing, not anything that the heads did on their property.
Okay.
Answer your questions?
Yeah, I'm kind of concerned that the storage issue and this flooding of Unit 10 wasn't really addressed, and we're coming up to
I mean, I think the whole
preliminary plan.
conversation is the King Ditch just doesn't want to assume any responsibility
Right,
for. I
right.
think that would be on the, the
On the developer, not on
And
the
I think that is
individual
the-
unit owner.
I mean, that would be
Tiny
something to work
homeowner.
out between the unit owner and the developer.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say in terms of the town, you know, we look at the floodplain information we get from FEMA, and that doesn't show any of the King Ditch's potential flooding issues. So I would say it would become an issue between the heads and the King Ditch, but the King Ditch is trying to disclose that now.
Mm-hmm.
And if the heads want to pursue their current plan, that's going to be on them if something does happen on their side of the property.
Okay.
But in terms of our regulations, we really only lean on the FEMA regulations for floodplain. And again, the King Ditch isn't showing up on that.
Okay.
Board have any other questions? Any other public comment?
Brian Blanchard, 627 Louisiana Drive. I think it's a nice, tidy, unique project. I like it. The one comment I would make is, have we thought about how to connect that little village to town? Is there any connectivity planned for that development to the bridge where the sidewalks pick up.
And I can kind of answer that. They are required to put in sidewalks along Bayfield Parkway in front of their property. So at this point, we don't require them to do the off-site sidewalks, but along their property, they will be putting in sidewalk.
Thank you, sir.
Was there not also a comment about putting in a crosswalk across 160B?
Yeah,
to
they're
the
they're
south?
putting in the ADA ramp on that corner as well.
Any other public comment?
Cat Katzos, 525 Dove Ranch Road. First of all, I also agree that we need the diversity of this type of housing available in our community. I guess I'm a little perplexed about tiny homes remaining on wheels if they are not considered, permanent residents and have the flexibility to come and go. Then it's more or less an RV. So how does this fit in with like building codes? And what if these tiny homes create electrical fire that cause a greater fire to the area? How do we view that? What is the concern that these are stick-built homes on platforms that are mobile versus RVs? RVs even have code. So I wonder about that. The other thing that I'm concerned about, but I'm very happy to hear that the heads have taken the initiative to have that natural waterfowl area kind of researched and figured out if there's any impact, is how much of a funnel it is from that development down the highway and into the river. It's a natural funnel. And I guess I'm kind of concerned that nobody felt it would be necessary to put a detention pond on that corner, just as an extra measure to protect what possibly could be downriver going into the river. So those were two things that really stood out for me.
Thank you, ma'am.
And I can start to address those, and then Steve may want to fill in. But the first one was, what was the first one again? Oh, the building codes, thank you. The building codes, and so right now, we would be reviewing this the same way we review mobile home parks. So they're allowed to remain on wheels, they don't have to be on a permanent foundation. If they're built in the town limits, then we do inspections. If they're built in the county limits, then the county has an inspector that could do that. If they're like professionally built somewhere else, usually they'll put in some sort of inspection sticker on them, kind of like a HUD sticker. So it just depends on where they're coming from, but if they are built in town limits, then our inspector would be the one that would be going in and doing those inspections.
Is that going to be a requirement?
It is, yeah, because they're habitable.
Yeah.
So it is a requirement under our code that they have some level.
There wasn't a gray,
And from,
muddy area between an RV and a stick-built house, and they kind of didn't fall into either one of those categories?
They fall under the like modular or mobile home. So what we would do for a mobile home park, we would do for this type of.
from what
use.
I've heard from some tiny home builders, they're pretty strict
Yeah.
on their standards.
And then the other issue with the stormwater, and Steve might need to help a little bit with this, but under state requirements, they are under the threshold for needing that pond, but they are working with the Army Corps with possible discharge into the river. They're working with the Army Corps to do a permit, so they have a biologist that's going to be working with them. I don't know if you want to add anything to that. That was my planning generalist.
Sure. Yeah, basically, the site is mostly gravel. In fact, there's no asphalt, there's no concrete. Because the tiny homes are on wheels, water could actually flow under the tiny home and into that gravel, so the increase in runoff is pretty minimal, and even I wouldn't expect any water quality issues because you'll have lots of infiltration into that gravel. And we have been in contact with the Army Corps regarding discharging into the dry riverbed and the wetland area, and yeah, we're working with them. We have a biologist coming out to take a look and make sure everything's okay there, so we'll have more information on that. But so far, all indications are they don't have an issue with us discharging to to the wetlands or to the dry riverbed.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comment? All right, seeing none, I'll move on to 2B, 2022-06, Mustang Crossing, use by review.
So I'm not using PowerPoint to its full potential today because that's what seems to be messing up my computer, so I'm just gonna leave the slide like this. It's working. All right, so there's 2 Mustang Crossing reviews today. The first one is their resource extraction use by review. This is required because they are locating residential in close proximity to an existing gas well and gathering lines. Then the second presentation would be the preliminary plan. And if this, I would say you can't have one without the other. So if for some reason the Planning Commission doesn't want to act on this first one, then they shouldn't act on that second one either until the first one's acted upon. So I just wanted to kind of explain that process because they are tied together. So this one is the use by review, and again, because they are locating on the northeast corner, they have an existing gas wellhead that they're locating residential around. So a use by review does have criteria that the Planning Commission looks at when you review these types of permits, and the Planning Commission does make the final decision. So if the Planning Commission did deny it, they could appeal that decision to the Board of Trustees. But if the Planning Commission approves it, then this decision's been made. And so I just wanted to point that out as part of the process. And so we've been going back and forth on this one, and really staff's, has some concerns with the proximity to a gas facility as well as the gathering lines. We don't have anything in our code. While we reference the county code, we cannot revert to the county code, we revert to state code because we're a statutory city. And so we can't just say we're going to adopt the county standards and start using those without going through a formal process to amend our land use code to adopt the standards. So right now we would revert to state standards, which they don't really have anything on the reciprocal of houses being located next to a gas well. Now they have a lot of standards in terms of a new oil and gas facility going in where there's existing residential, but they don't have a lot of reciprocal. So what staff has done is we've just been trying to work closely with the applicant to make sure that public health and safety is the #1 priority for these locations. We do have some concerns with dwelling unit distances from gathering lines, although I did get confirmation from the holder of the oil and gas facility that they are not the high-pressured lines, so they're not as concerned about them. So that's a good thing to understand. We also have some concerns with the location of residential property lines over the 40-foot water line and gas line easements. And so what that means is right now on the north and on the east sides, they have right-of-way easements for the gas and water lines. And technically, you can put property lines over that, but we've run into other places in the community where people have built fences, put in sheds, other landscaping features over an easement, and if for some reason they have to go in and repair the pipe, they've got to take all that out. And so we really want to prevent that type of situation from happening in a new development if we can. And so we've been talking to the applicant, and we talked about 2 options. #1 is just pulling all the lot lines off of that right-of-way, 40-foot right-of-way, so that nobody's trying to fence it in. And then the second option that we've talked about is for the applicant to go ahead and put in some sort of fence all along the easement line so that everybody knows there's a no build beyond that fence. I think that the concern we have there is some of the property owners might come in and realize they have a larger property than what they're being able to use, and may still try and take over some of their own property within that easement. But the easements clearly are a no-build easement, and so just trying to respect that. And so I think that's one of the concerns staff has is the fence enough to keep future residents from building into that easement area. And those future structure encroachments will fall on the town to enforce. So I'm sorry about, let me see.
Have you seen that before in the county at other projects?
No. And again, Dove Ranch is an example of where it would not be good if something happened to that line or they had to go in and replace a big piece of it, because there's a lot of encroachment in Dove Ranch. And you're dealing with here, like, 20-something properties that you're going to have to be working with if they're all building into those easements and then something happens with the pipeline. So I think that's our biggest concern. I know the applicant will probably want to elaborate on that, but I just wanted to point that out. So that, and then ICAV, who oversees that facility, has the same concerns as staff, that, they don't want to be dealing with structures into their right-of-way. In fact, they're actually happy that a proposed trail system will be located there, because if soft surface trail, they can go in and make repairs easily without having to deal with structures. And so they think that's one of the better solutions that they've seen. So I think that's a good thing, and for the applicant to be proposing that. The other concern ICAV had was their sound and visual mitigation around the gas wellhead itself. They say sometimes they can get loud, and when neighbors locate next to them, they start complaining, even though the facility's been there first. And so I think without requiring anything right now, I think as the project moves forward, I just have a condition that the town and ICAV and the developer will work together to figure out what will be the best mitigation there, whether it's just some additional landscaping. They're already proposing like an open space area, so maybe it's just some additional landscaping and screening that can help reduce that visual and sound for mitigation. So with that, I do know the applicant is present. And if you have any questions of staff, I can answer those as well.
Did you want to ask staff questions prior?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Paul O'Neill, SEH, 934 Main Avenue in Durango. We're the civil engineer for the project. One clarification I wanted to make on what Nicole was saying is there are only 7 lots that the property line would encroach upon the easement. There's 2 on the north where the gas line jogs south near the irrigation crossing.
Do you want to point it out here, maybe?
Yep.
If that helps. These maps are hard to read already.
So spot 61 and 62 on this map, and then 54 through 58 would encroach on there. The remaining ones along the north, the property line is at that easement line.
And I think adding to that, we did ask a condition be made that when the plat is recorded, there is really a clear no-build area, because it is really hard to see some of those lines, so we know exactly where the easement is, so that when people get their title work, they see there's a no-build behind some of those lots.
Yep, and as part of that submittal, we did propose the fence along the property line, as well as a potential freestanding fence or some planter boxes, something to delineate the property line so that those people using the trail know that that is someone's yard still. And the thought would be there that it would be some garden boxes, maybe some flower pots, grass area for playing with the kids, but no structures. And then we have spoke with ICAV, and one of the sound issues we hope will go away is when we bring electrical service into the subdivision, there's the potential for them to switch to an electric system rather than the diesel generator that they currently have. And then I'm happy to answer any more questions.
Thank you, sir. So moving forward, is there any more public comment concerning?
Brian Blanchard, 627 Louisiana Drive. First off, I'd like to thank the developers and the design team. I think they're heading in the right direction, and they have made a series of modifications to the initial proposal. A lot of what I was going to talk about, Nicole and the developers have already kind of addressed, and that is the setbacks from the gas wells itself. I know the town doesn't have specific restrictions on how close a home can be built to an existing well, but it seems appropriate and sensible and responsible that the town follows some sort of guidelines and standards on that. There is good reason to establish minimum setbacks for the safety of the community, especially for the neighbors near the well. There have been several major incidents in Colorado regarding proximity of homes to well, and even to the extent of loss of life. If the town agrees to allow the developer of homes and businesses within potentially dangerous setback distances, then the situation continues to the next development as they refer to the previous development that were granted lesser setbacks. So I'm going to skip through the rest of this because I think the developer and the town itself has addressed the gathering lines pretty well. It would be the setback from the gas well itself and the proximity to the houses. I too talked to iCave, and their concern is upgrading this well into the future. It's an older well, and that could take some doing, and it could cause an additional noise situation, which they don't really want to get into with the neighborhood. They go through this all the time, they said, and it's just a problem for them trying to provide that service to the community. On to the traffic study real quick. The traffic is going to be the traffic. They're estimating 765 ADTs per day, which could be split in their estimation between Mustang Drive and Louisiana, which I think is probably true. It could be done, which is 300 and some cars more down my street. I live on Louisiana, which is a huge impact to our street. And the street itself, Louisiana, really could use some upgrading as it stands. But my two biggest concerns are the intersection at Clover and Parkway, which needs work already, let alone with 300 more cars from this development and also the other developments going in the area. So that would be a major concern with me. I travel on that intersection basically every day, and it's a bit of a problem now. And then the other one would be Mars and Buck Highway. That one is a really rough intersection. I'm sure you've all been down there. If you try to turn up onto Mars, it's tricky. So those are the concerns I have on the traffic impact, and you know it's going to do that. You know it's going to impact both those intersections big time. Who's going to pay for that? So is that something the town is prepared to just take on? And then the last thing would be the parks, park and open space. I am still hopeful that the developer will work out a space on this plan for a minimum 3-acre, one-site sized community park. Yes, it's nice to have the walking paths, and it does take care of a couple of issues, but, and I know they've stated they have 6 acres of open space, but they're adding every little piece, detention ponds, the wellhead setback, all of that. I still would be grateful for a nice community park in there to set some standards for the developments coming up in the future. And as the developer has stated, let's raise the bar. So I would hope that they would do that. But I think all in all, we're heading in the right direction. Town has the right to establish specific input for how they want to see that and other developments. So I encourage you to take a serious look at that, see if we can improve it. My new motto is it good for the town? Is it good for the community? Really simple. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
You and I should get together, Brian, and talk. So I'd like to add emphasis to this gas well issue. I don't think the 500-foot setback is enough. It states here that the operator said, quote, it is required to be at least 2,000 feet from an occupied structure when looking at these well pads. If it's good for an operating company or a well company to ensure that they've got enough of a setback for safety, why isn't it good enough for the town? Why isn't it good enough for this developer to take on that action, to be responsible for that? I'm also concerned, again, for the age of the well. There was no soil test to verify that this well has not been leaking a certain level of toxins or hazardous waste into the immediate area where children could be, animals could be. So I feel like we need a soil test to verify that this well has not been leaking toxins. If you look at that site currently, that well doesn't really affect anybody as it currently sits at the back end of that property, which was land, cattle land, or grassland. So I want to reemphasize that the well is a bigger issue than people are really giving credit to about it. And then the other thing that I have a problem with is the traffic study was done by the very engineering company that is representing the developer. How is that traffic study not a conflict of interest? And how are we getting good numbers out of that? So I would ask the commission to consider those two things.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other public comments? Hearing none, I will move on to 2C, 2022-5 Mustang Crossing Preliminary Plan.
This is that second piece to this project. And again, this is the one you guys have seen a few times now. The Mustang Crossing preliminary plan. They've made some changes based on comments that have been provided back to them and working on the resource extraction and meeting some of the other code requirements for pedestrian connectivity within the property. So their project went from 85 lots to 81 lots now. So that's a change. They are proposing 6.4 acres of open space, which includes what I would call a small pocket park, detention facilities, their soft surface trail, open space buffer around the gas facility. And they're proposing, the other big changes, they're proposing to do this in 2 phases now. So the preliminary plan will cover both, but they're proposing during the final plan portion to divide this up. And a lot of that had to do with just continuing to work with the Schroeder ditch to make sure that they can get the design for that relocation or underground, or however they're going to do that, worked out with Schroeder ditch, and that gives them a little more time because that'll be on their phase 2. So when they do come back, they'll be coming back with just that western portion of the property. Just a brief history of this one as well. They did go through a comp plan amendment, an annexation, their sketch plan, they're at preliminary right now, and then they go to final. So them and Marlin are kind of working side by side along each other through the same review process. And so I kind of went through this with Marlin, but we're at the technical review stage, and we provide feedback, and then they go back and finalize their plans before they submit for their final plan. And in this case, which is different than Marlin, is Marlin's not subdividing, but this property is, so they would do a final plan, final plat as part of their next phase. And again, they're going to do that just for phase one. So phase one will have 47 lots, and phase two will have 34 lots. And I kind of went through the park, and so that kind of shows, the gray line just kind of shows where that phase division is. And again, some of the changes, and I know that they're going to be wanting to outline some of those changes as well, but you can see they had larger blocks that have been divided up by pedestrian connections so that you can get to the trail from different areas within the community. So it's hard to see with my mouse, but you've got these areas. They have a road here. So they're just more connection points to get to the trail, breaks up the block for pedestrians, mid-block pedestrian access to get to the pocket park. And so that, again.
Where is the pocket park?
Pocket Park is down in this lower southeast corner, right here.
That's the detention pond.
Yeah, so what they've done, and that's one of the changes they made too, is they've made half of their pocket park into a detention pond, which was not shown to us in the sketch plan. So I asked for some additional information on that because that was different than what was originally presented. And they did provide some additional information that they, and again, Paul might want to elaborate a little bit more on this, but the slope of that detention pond is so that it could still be used as a play area. So it'd be like a kind of a passive play area. And then they have, the other half of it will have a little bit more of a park setting, but I'll let them kind of answer that in more detail when it's their time of what they're proposing for that park. But yeah, it'll be a shared facility now. And a couple other quick things I wanted to point out on Mustang, which I don't have in my PowerPoint, but in my review, I did determine that Louisiana, through the current Mesa Meadow subdivision, was never finished to the edge of property. And so that's going to be a requirement because they do need to connect to Louisiana. They're going to have to do some off-site improvements. I don't quite know why that occurred that way, but so they'll have a piece of Louisiana that they've got to finish through Mesa Meadows to connect to their project. We also asked them, their original plans, did not stub the southern roads all the way to the property edge, and so they've made some of those adjustments back. So we've had some back and forth on this one the last couple weeks to further refine it. And I'll go ahead and put the motions up there, but I know the applicant is present and could probably elaborate on quite a few of those issues as well.
Any questions?
I guess I have one. And just being familiar with Mesa Meadows and their retention pond and liability, when there's a HOA, you have to carry a certain amount of liability insurance for the HOA. And so within Mesa Meadows, they made them put a fence around the retaining pond. So then in effect, it's useless. It's not a park, it's a retention pond. And I'm wondering if moving forward, the HOA is not established yet, obviously, but that would be one of my concerns because, yeah, it looks great on paper that there's a park, but then there's that liability that the insurance comes in and says, oh, hold up, you have kids in that neighborhood, and now we have to have that fenced because it's a retaining pond. And I know also in Clover Meadows where they have the new phase, they have that retention pond out by the school. They wanted to use it as a park preference as well. But a retention pond is a retention pond. It's not a park. So I just want to throw that out there to make that, heard as well.
I agree.
Not before, Paul, I'll say that a lot of communities now are allowing their retention ponds to become parks when you have a gradual slope. The steeper slopes do probably need to be fenced in because the way the water will fill up, it's going to get deeper faster because it's got a lot steeper slope. But a lot of communities are doing that, so you could use it as a joint use rather than having this temporary or retention pond that's only used occasionally when it's raining and then it just sits there. So they've been trying to use them for more park area as an amenity. And honestly, I think town staff would really like to see Clover Meadows be seeded with grass and kids being able to play in it when it's not full of water. So I would just say trends are changing and communities are leaning more towards kind of a shared space rather than just clearly a retention pond. But you can only do that if it's not steep. So it has to be a gradual.
That's what I was coming to. As long as it's not a steep retention pond and it's that gradual feed, I would be more enticed to. But if it's, you know, kind of what they have in Mesa Meadows where they had to fence
those are
it.
steep.
Yeah, so.
But I'll let Paul, he can talk about the slope and what they're proposing for that one.
Thank you. I can't speak to the insurance requirements. The HOA hasn't been formed, doesn't have an insurance company yet, but I do understand that concern. The intent of that park detention pond area is to be a multi-use facility. The plan changed by adding a detention pond over by the gas well, so the volume we need at the park area has been cut in half from the previous plan. The hope is that that trail that runs along the property line will act as a berm, and the road slopes down to it, and so on the uphill side, you'll just walk down a slope, and then that berm will kind of wrap around both sides and the bottom, and that will create the pond or the volume that's detained with the small outlet structure. The hope is that it's a usable park and not just a detention pond. Often detention ponds are the last thing thought of, and so you can't lose any lots, you can't do anything, and so they get crammed into a corner and the sides are too steep and they kind of turn into a mud hole. That's not that's not what's going to happen here. We've got multiple detention ponds to allow for better slopes and better usable open space for those. Just wanted to point out a couple other things that changed. I think Nicole got most of them from when we saw you last on February 8th. The previous plan had 85 lots, we're down to 81. Some of that was detention requirements, some of it was setbacks from the well. Also, I think it's labeled as Road F on the plan, that connection at mid-block took 2 lots. We're working with the Schroeder Ditch or the Campbell Lateral. We received comments back from San Juan Engineering, and we revised our alignment based on those comments. Another thing I wanted to point out just for reference, the pocket park that we are proposing is approximately half an acre. On the plan, it's hard to judge size, so the park on Mesa Avenue is 0.7 acres, and the park on Oak Drive is 1/4 of an acre. So somewhere between the size of those 2 parks is what we're proposing, as well as the open space. And then Nicole wanted to just respond to a couple of the questions. The traffic study is prepared by us. I think that's fairly typical, but the town engineer will be reviewing that and providing comments. So it's not us just approving everything that I say goes. It gets reviewed independently by San Juan for the ditch, by
SGM
for the town infrastructure. And I think that was it. Another quick thing to comment on the well radius setbacks. If you do start to go with some of those larger setbacks, it really takes up considerable area. If you were to ever move to a 500-foot radius from a wellhead, that would be 18 acres around that wellhead would be unusable for development. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Happy to answer any questions to you guys.
Does the board
And I
have
think
any-
the 2,000 would almost make this whole project not feasible, if
Yeah,
I'm
it
not
would be-
mistaken.
I don't know what that would be, but it would be a lot.
I think it would be close to the Mesa Meadows edge.
Board have any questions?
And I do want to point out too, the 2,000 is a new standard that the state just adopted. And again, their state standards are not reciprocal, so the way they kind of state their standards is they want oil and gas to be 2,000 feet from a habitable structure, but they usually have a lease with the property owner, but they're not going to prohibit the property owner from building, or from, they're not going to prohibit the property owner from building closer to that wellhead, because that's that property owner's property. So that's why they don't have that reciprocal. So somebody who allowed, like say somebody wanted to put 1 unit on this property, they could build close to the wellhead and they don't have to meet the state standards, whereas you can't allow another wellhead to be within 2,000 feet of an habitable structure. And again, that's because they give the property owner property rights. That's the main reason. And I'll say also on this, the county is looking at new standards. You know, Bayfield does not have standards right now. We'd like to get some in place because we do. We will see this in the future as well. The county's looking at some new standards, and we want to see how that plays out. And then we might take those standards and adopt them, and they might have to have some adjustments to them based on theirs are more county versus an more urban area. But hopefully this summer we'll get to see a draft of that, and then that'll give us some better idea for how we want to move forward. And so there'll be definitely more discussions with the Planning Commission as we move along in terms of trying to get some oil and gas standards into the community.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there any other public comment?
Jason Evans, 303 Meadows Circle. The one thing that stood out to me was Black Hills pointed out the location of the gas line and its interfacing with the roadways, and the fact that they're pointing out when the new taps were going to be put in, it would result in some sort of damage to the roadway and require that. So that just logistically to me didn't make a whole lot of sense, because you're going to have to tear up a brand new road every single time you're going to put 81 built structures into this facility. The other thing that I wanted to more understand what the policy and the procedure is going to be once you get that geotechnical report, and how that's going to affect the approval process, because sometimes those reports can have quite a bit of information that could be detrimental to a planning operation based on my professional experience, and could affect that planning. So I just would like to understand better what the board is going to do once those become available and affect the approval process.
I can kind of address both of those. So we are reviewing Black Hills comments because usually we like to see utilities in the roadway. We don't want to see them under the sidewalks because concrete's harder to replace in big sections than asphalt. And we usually would have them put them in before the road is paved with their stub outs, knowing that the lots are going to be platted already. But they also, in the past, some of the utility providers, would like to put utilities in private property because then they don't have to tear up people's grass versus hardscape like a road or a sidewalk. So we'll be working closely with them to figure out the best location for that, and we have our engineers reviewing their comments right now. So we don't quite know exactly where it's going to fall, but it's under review. And then the second piece on the geotech, so the things we're going to be looking at is there's certain types of soil types. Bayfield's very common. We have a common soil that expands with moisture. And so the geotech report will provide us information on mitigation for foundations to make sure that foundations can be built appropriately with that type of soil. Mitigation for how they need to install their infrastructure, so water, sewer lines. And so it's important for us to see that report and make sure that before we issue any building permits or give them any development approvals to start putting in infrastructure that we know that they're meeting the mitigation requirements that are in that geotech report. So hopefully we will get that information soon.
I guess just a professional experience, I found that when we turn agricultural lands and developments, the water table, especially with the expansive soil in western Colorado and its association, can drastically affect the water mitigation requirements and the soil expansion associated with foundations. So I just think that's could drastically change the plan, and that's why I had personal concerns and professional concerns of just how that could drastically affect the overall layout in the plan and what that would result in a setback in having to recalibrate that and understanding that timeline.
Yeah, so I think we're not going to give final approval until we have that geotech. And so if they do have to make some adjustments, they may have to, I mean, the final approval has to go to the Board of Trustees. So it just really depends on what we see come out of it. It's hard to answer that until, but I will say most of Bayfield has that type of soil, and we've seen, you know, a lot of development. And so it's something that we know we're going to have to deal with, but there is ways to mitigate around it. Or there are ways to mitigate around it.
Good evening. I'm Glenn Moselle from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And I really don't have much to add, but I just wanted to say thank you for your time and consideration tonight. And again, thanks staff for their guidance for this process, as well as the neighbors and their comments, always good. And I think really the end result here has evolved significantly and is a better product than what we started out with. And really appreciate that. We're excited about the project, and we're hoping to deliver phase 1 lots this summer if possible. So I'm available for any questions.
When are you looking at possibly phase 2?
Right following thereafter.
As soon as it's built out.
So you'll build out phase 1 first before you start phase 2?
It could be parallel process, simultaneous. Depends when we get approval. We need the Army Corps engineer to sign off on the ditch. And, if that happens timely, then phase 2 could occur. I prefer it to occur this summer rather than waiting the following year. But we're hoping to deliver finished lots of phase 1 this year, and that was part of our reasoning for the 2 phases too, so we could stay on a
Fair enough.
timeline here. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment concerning Mustang Crossing preliminary plan? All right, go for it.
We got a question real quick. Nicole, you just mentioned the issue with Louisiana not going all the way to the property line. Their drawing shows Road A stopping short of that south property line.
Oh, yeah, I see that. Well, we'll work with them on that, just to make sure. So I think that's, if you look at the extraction, maybe it's just the trail crossing it, but the overall site plan and the resource extraction plans don't quite line up.
Yeah, I'm looking at the lot layout, sheet 3 of 40.
It is slightly back from the property line. Right now, we have it at 20 feet back, just to allow for the trail to cross and some catch slopes to hit before it goes across the property line. If we need to, we can bring it a little bit closer, but I also want to leave it back far enough that depending upon a future design, they have a little bit of flexibility to tie into that road rather than being right up against the property line at that grade.
We'll continue to work with them on that before final plan,
Yeah, just,
and come up with something that's agreeable.
okay.
Yeah, some of the plans look a little different, so we'll confirm that.
Good question. Any other questions from the board?
Yeah, I wanted a little bit more description and detail on what the trails are going to look like, what the design is going to be, and who'll be responsible for retaining or maintaining them?
So on the site plan, page 2 of 40, it shows that typical section at the top. And so what that's describing is kind of that open space that circles the entire property. We're proposing an 8-foot crusher fines trail with landscaping kind of on both sides. And then the property line fence is shown on your left. And then the homeowner property line fence is shown on your left. And the adjacent property is shown on the right. That will be fenced with an agricultural, no climb, one-stranded barbed wire fence.
Okay, and so what will the landscaping on each side of the trail entail?
Mostly grass seeding, trees, shrubs. There's a landscape plan, I believe, in there as well that shows some of the plantings, but just kind of a, not overly landscaped, but natural landscape with some grasses and trees and shrubs mixed in kind of throughout. Nothing like a corridor. The trail's going to meander a little bit. Just trying to recreate a little bit of a natural trail.
And the homeowners association will be responsible for maintaining it?
Yes.
How does that work? Maybe Nicole, you can answer that.
Yeah, a couple things real quick. I do want to point out that I know the adjacent neighbor asked for barbed wire. I don't know if the town has that same thought process, so we'll work with them and try and come up with a solution, but I don't know if we really want to see barbed wire on that site fence. I just want to put that on the record. In terms of an HOA, so the HOAs have what they have requirements for, like we call them codes, covenants, restrictions, or declarations, where each homeowner, when they purchase the lot, gets it as part of their title work, and it outlines all the responsibilities of the HOA. And what their maintenance responsibilities are versus what town responsibilities are. And so this would be in that HOA documentation that shows that they all have to pay an association fee, whether it's monthly or annually or however they collect it. Mason Meadows is like an annual association fee, and that covers like the detention basins and some of the trails in there and the signs and things like that. So it just depends on what their private homeowner common areas are. They would spell that out in that document. It gets recorded. Everybody who has title will see that document when they get their title work. And that's their responsibilities. Now, I will say, Dove Ranch had an HOA and it did get dissolved. So, town staff does have some concerns with HOAs. And we're trying to create a process to do more outreach with HOAs and make sure they understand their maintenance responsibilities, especially when it comes to stormwater and detention ponds. But I think clarifying that regularly with the HOAs or even the homeowners is important, because even Dove Ranch, they don't have an HOA, but their homeowners still have responsibility for some of those common areas, and they have to figure that out. It's not the town's responsibility because it was part of the agreement when it was developed. And so that gets a little more complicated. So I'd say it's not always an easy thing, but it's something we just need to stay on top of and having that communication regularly to make sure that they understand their responsibilities.
It seems like the HOAs have dissolved in Bayfield, and I'm just worried about these paths becoming overgrown with grass and weeds and not maintained.
I'd say, that's a valid concern. And again, that's something that we want to continue to work with the HOAs on, because right now, Bayfield doesn't have that capacity to take on trails and additional parks. And so this does need to fall on the HOA, and they do need to do that maintenance. And it's something where we're going to need to go out and point out and be kind of that enforcer and say, hey, you're not doing your job. And so we're going to start doing some of that.
Does the town have any control over whether they dissolve or not?
No.
No.
They have to approach the town. The town does have a saying.
It's
But
more of
when
a
Dove
state.
Ranch dissolved, they didn't approach the town. They just kind of did their own.
Well, you have to go through the state attorney general's office.
Yeah.
That's really where the decision to dissolve comes from.
And this has been my concern with these, subdivisions putting in playground equipment or, swings and slides. If that HOA does dissolve and those things start splintering and kids get hurt, that's
Right.
my concern on that. So that's not a real attractive option a lot of times for these developments.
So are we kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place in that?
Not really, because the developer is gonna be the president of the HOA because he has the majority of the lots
To start.
And he's gonna be the one that's responsible and held accountable until those lots are sold. And so if you keep him in the loop and keep him accountable, you can maintain that. And as the HOA gets bigger, he's gonna lose those lots, and then it's gonna kind of form its own government and move from there. And so he has the oversight on that, but he's gonna be the majority owner until those,
For a
that
while.
first phase, you have to have like 30-some homes to even have the quorum, so it's gonna take a little bit for that HOA to kind of develop, and, I think my recommendation would be working with the developer, because he's gonna be overseeing the HOA to a certain extent, and you're gonna have to hold him accountable, if that makes sense.
The other hard thing with HOAs too, though, is they can change their covenants without the town's involvement as well. And so, again, going back and making sure that historically they're still maintaining, even if they dissolve it, it's still all the property owner's responsibility to maintain the trails. Whether they have an HOA or not, they're buying into a subdivision that has that responsibility for each property owner. And so there's ways to do that, but HOA is the easiest to deal with. And so hopefully they don't dissolve. I think that's our hope. And I think, again, outreach is important. And I think we don't have a lot of them, so it's something that we can do and something we're talking about doing and making sure that we provide that outreach so that they understand their responsibilities. And some of the ones that have dissolved, we're trying to figure that out as well and how we want to do that outreach.
Can I rewind just a minute back to the use by review for the well pad? I think there was a comment by Kat about a soil report from ICAV, and is it not their responsibility to provide, and it's public information, maintenance reports on those wells?
I don't know enough to know if it's public
Okay.
information, but they've been pretty easy to work with, so I can ask and see if they have anything recent on it. And I'm sure the property owner has the right to ask too, because there's some rights of the property owner as well. So we can look into that. Like I said, they've been pretty easy to work with in terms of, giving us information.
Because it's my understanding by law, they do have to, test the soils and make sure that they're up
There's
to
maintenance
standards.
requirements, yes. I just, I don't know the specifics of them, but we'll look into that.
Any other questions?
I
guess
just
to go
have
back to the-
one comment regarding the name of Bayfield at the bottom of these plan sheets should be spelled Bayfield, not Bayfield.
Come on, Paul.
I didn't spell it, but I did. Is it on mobile?
Yes.
These are the ones I have printed.
Yep.
Just find all. Does AutoCAD do that?
You have to change it once.
For the final.
Right.
I guess the comment from Black Hills on the gas stubs and the location of the gas line in the road, is the intent to put all the stub outs before the asphalt goes down? I mean, it's.
Usually.
It's
Yeah.
not showing, I mean, you show the water.
When it's platted, yes. If you know where the lot lines are and you know where they're gonna be located, then that's the intent. Because we don't want to tear up brand-new asphalt
Right.
within the next couple years. So yes, usually that's what we would require at the plating process, for the plating process.
And I guess my other question is kind of with the roads and the sidewalks, where does the HOA or the property owner's responsibilities start and stop, and where's the town's responsibility start and stop?
So I can answer a few of that. The roads will be at some point accepted by the town, so they will be public roads. Sidewalks are also public, but we require the property owners to maintain their sidewalks. So, removing snow and all that is townwide is a responsibility of the property owner, not the town. And then, again, the trail systems will all be HOA, the detention will be HOA, the pocket park will be HOA, the open space HOA.
So the sidewalks, snow removal, that stuff's
Property owner.
What about when the sidewalk heaves?
I believe property owner as well, but sometimes there's a share, go ahead,
It's a
Jeremy.
shared 50/50.
Yeah.
What was your question, Brian?
Well, just when those sidewalks heave and crack and become
Safety
a
issue.
safety issue, I mean, they're a mess in Mesa Meadows right now.
Yeah, well, currently it is 50-50 split. The town does have some funding available. So if we do get a request from a homeowner for a broken or unsafe sidewalk, the town would split that cost with the property owner.
As long as those funds are available.
Yeah, I guess just understanding the soil conditions in Bayfield, I mean, the sidewalks are gonna move all over it. The connected sidewalk to the curb, I think, is even more problematic, just because you've gotta keep it tight to that road to the curb. So something to really consider when you're looking at your soil profiles there. And, nobody wants to do a lot of structural fill under a sidewalk, but it's the only way to stop it.
Any other public comment, questions?
Brian Blanchard, 627 Louisiana Drive. I just have a comment, question, kind of proposal. What if, and I know the town is concerned with taking on abandoned HOA amenities and the cost thereof, and I get that. Could there be a way that the developer, at the time that they relinquish their responsibility for the HOA, which is at 50%, 51%, whatever the sale of the lots are, and that developer steps aside and then the individual property owners take on those responsibilities, would it be possible at that point for the developer to put into escrow a certain amount of money that if the HOA went defunct into the future, that at least there'd be some sort of temporary gap fix for that cost incurred by the town. At the point where the developer has sold 51% of his development, they've probably made a fair amount of money on what they've done in the town of Bayfield. So could it be possible that the developer at that point put not a lot of money, but some money in that the town felt comfortable with that would support the maintenance of not only the parks in Mustang Crossing and the trail system there, but also the developments that are be coming up into the future?
Thank you, sir.
That might be a legal question.
Yeah, I don't.
Katie or Nicole, do you have a comment toward that?
Well, I would say at any time the town takes over some management, even if it's minor, all of a sudden it becomes the town's responsibility. And I think we're talking about looking at property owners and what's their responsibility to have maintained those, whether it's a detention pond or a pocket park or whatever that is, even if the HOA has went defunct. So I think we're looking at this more of in a holistic fashion, looking at, responsibilities, homeowners, for some of the areas where, the town, we are looking at Dove Ranch to put quite a lot of money into a detention pond. Is it really the responsibility of the town or the homeowners that are benefiting from that stormwater detention area at some point?
So you look at that more as a special assessment against the homeowners in
I
that
think it's
subdivision?
a broader conversation, yes.
So I would add to that that's exactly why oversight.
Can you go to the microphone?
I know, I understand. Behave. So again, that goes back to the issue that it always runs downhill, right? So now it's put back on the homeowners to take on the responsibility for what the developer did not ensure in its original development. So, you know, we need those subdivision agreements that hold the developer accountable. It's the last checklist, more or less. Did you hit all the marks? And if you didn't, how do we hold these developers accountable for what they don't deliver on? They owe it to us as a town, our coffers, and the homeowners. Why is it always the homeowners that have to pick up the pieces of what a developer did not act responsibly towards?
Thank you, ma'am. All right, moving on to the action agenda, 3A, approval of March 8, 2022 minutes. I'd entertain a motion.
I so move.
I'll second that.
I hear a second. Roll call, please.
Vice Chairperson Gadd,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Shea Heidinger,
Yes.
Mayor Tarkington,
Yes.
Chairperson Nyberg,
Yes.
all in favor.
All right, action agenda 3B, 2022-04 Marlin Village PUD preliminary plan. I'd entertain a motion.
Any discussion or?
Any further discussion?
I would entertain a motion to approve the Marlin Village PUD with the findings and conditions stated in the packet.
I'll second that.
I hear a second. Roll call, please.
Vice Chairperson Gadd,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Shea Heidinger,
Yes.
Mayor Tarkington,
Yes.
Chairperson Nyberg,
Yes.
all in favor.
All right, moving on to action agenda 3C, 2022-06 Mustang Crossing use by review. Any further discussion?
I just think that there was a lot of really good clarification on those conditions stated in the packet, and I mean, I personally feel very comfortable with the direction and the discussions going forward. I don't know what the sentiment of the rest of the board is, but
No, I feel good moving forward.
so then I would motion to approve the Mustang Crossing resource extraction use by review with the following findings and conditions as stated in the packet.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Vice Chairperson Gadd,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Shea Heidinger,
Yes.
Mayor Tarkington,
Yes.
Chairperson Nyberg,
Yes.
all in favor.
All right, moving on to 3D action agenda 2022-05 Mustang Crossing preliminary plan. Any further discussion?
I just want to say for the record, I do appreciate the Blanchards, your persistence on that, and I do appreciate you, Glenn, for really coming together to meet halfway on a lot of those issues. And I just, I wanted to say that out loud.
All are good comments. Do I hear a second?
Did we have a
We
motion?
don't
Oh,
have a
no, we don't
motion.
even have a motion yet. Do I hear a motion?
You want me to do the trifecta tonight?
Yeah, go for it.
I would entertain a motion to approve the Mustang Crossing preliminary plan with the following findings and conditions as stated in the packet.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Vice Chairperson Gadd,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Shea Heidinger,
Yes.
Mayor Tarkington,
Yes.
Chairperson Nyberg,
Yes.
all in favor.
All right, action agenda 3E, Planning Commission, new member recommendations.
Yes, so as you all know, we are short one member, which makes nights like tonight when we have two gone a little tricky. And so we've been advertising that we want to get a new planning commission member. Per the land use code, we need to have 7 members in the planning commission whom are appointed ultimately by the mayor and approved by the town board. One of those members being the mayor, the second being a town board member, which we did get a new board seated last week, and our new trustee, Eli Luke, will be sitting in as an ex officio member for the planning commission. So he wasn't able to be here tonight, but he will start next month attending planning commission meetings as well. And so all members have to be residents of the town of Bayfield, and serve without compensation, and appointed members shall hold no other municipal office positions. And the term of each member is 4 years. And then the term of the mayor and ex officio member is based on their term in office. So again, we have 1 open spot. We did receive 2 applications. Cash Snooks, which I believe is on Zoom. Yes, there's Cash. If you want to wave hi, they can kind of see you. And then our other applicant was from Jason Evans. And so I did put their letter and application into the packet. And so the planning commission does need to make a recommendation, and then we will take that to the board next week for their decision.
And Jason is here in the audience as
Yeah,
well.
Jason stood up, yep. So I don't know how you want to proceed, chairperson, but if you wanted to ask some questions or have them state something, or how you want to.
Madam Mayor?
Since they're here, I would, like them to go ahead and introduce themselves and.
Give like a little
yeah.
rough bio.
So we'll let Jason go first, and then Cash will have you go second.
Hello again. My name is Jason Evans. I live at 303 Meadows Circle. Just recently, we've relocated here back to Bayfield. My wife grew up here in the Bayfield community, graduated high school, and her parents ahead of her. I currently work as a project engineer for the Ott Laboratory. It's a forensic engineering firm. We specialize in investigating accidents is the best way to summarize it. Anything from civil litigation to foundation repairs, construction defect, vehicle accident reconstruction, and my specialty is law enforcement incident reconstruction. Been doing that for the last year plus. I previously resided in Grand Junction for the last 7 years. Prior to that, I was a police officer for the Grand Junction Police Department for 7 years. I was a school resource officer, part of the community resource unit. I was a member of the SWAT team, and I also a firearms instructor and a defensive tactics instructor. Prior to that, I was serving in the military, U.S. Navy, for approximately 10 years, working on submarines as an electrician and a technical engineer. I served on the USS Columbia for 5 years and Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyards for 3 years, including 2 years of training. I have 2 children, Reese, who is 4, and Cooper is 2, and my wife is Jessica Evans, previously Huffmeyer. She's also, I work remotely. Our major office is out of Denver, so that's why I was lucky enough to move back to Bayfield and join the community.
Any questions?
Does the planning commission have the same rule that you have to be a resident for more than a year, or at least a year? Is that the?
It doesn't say
That's
that
just
in
for
the
Board of
code.
It has to be a
Trustees.
resident.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you explain again what type of engineering you do?
It's forensic engineering. So we get called, we both have a civil and a mechanical engineering department. So we specialize in anything, in construction defect is a big one. We do a lot of maintenance. One of our big specialties is school facility assessments and construction defect. We were a major part of the Grand Junction High School facility assessment, and which led to the new bond measure that led to the new Grand Junction High School. And then also we do mechanical engineering, which is anything from ADA compliance, trip and falls, slip and falls, to vehicle accident reconstruction from an engineering standpoint. And then I started a new division last year, coming from my law enforcement engineering background, in essentially police incident reconstruction, where we do video reconstruction and some video analysis from an engineering standpoint. So education background. I also have a master's in business administration in data analytics from Abilene Christian University, and I hold a nuclear engineering degree from Excelsior College.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All
Mr.
right,
Ki-
Cash, sorry.
Oh, no, go for it.
My name is Cash Nooks. I live at 10 West South Street here in Bayfield. I own my own business here in town, building houses, currently working a lot in the Clover Meadows new subdivision. I've been a resident of Bayfield since I was born, went to school here, graduated here. And I've just been really involved in the new subdivision there in Clover, and that's why I had an interest in being a part of the planning commission to help kind of shape the community. Me and my wife are actually expecting our first child soon, and we'd like to be able to raise a child in the community we're both proud of, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So we have to make a decision tonight?
We have to make a recommendation for
A
the
recommendation.
Board of Trustees. I mean, first of all, this is a position that's usually very hard to fill. I'm grateful that there are two very strong candidates that stepped up to be interested in joining this board, so.
Yeah, I'm glad that both of you have taken interest in the planning commission. Like Madam Mayor said, it's a hard position to fill, so I do appreciate both you guys putting in the time and effort. And with that, I guess we need to make a recommendation to the town board. So is there any further discussion from the board?
I think that Jason has terrific experience that could really help us with decision-making, and I also think it's great that Cash is a lifelong resident of Bayfield.
It's a tough one. I don't think we've ever been faced with this kind of predicament here, but,
I was gonna say, I don't know, Katie, when we heard from last week from the board that the question came up, do we need two trustees? Or do we want to open up planning commission to another community member? So I think maybe that could be, if you consider, like, do you want to really have two trustees, or do you want to have another community member? Maybe could be part of a recommendation. Again, we'd have to change the code, so
Right.
it takes some effort there. The other thing with changing the code, especially as tonight, is, and I'll say I come from Durango, we had an alternate. So when we didn't have a quorum, we had somebody else we could call upon that could come in and sit. Like tonight, we could have had 5 members if the alternate was available. So that's something, again, you'd have to change the code, but those are some things I think I'm just going to throw out as options for, to consider. I don't know if Katie has any other thoughts.
Well, and we have had concerns. We've had 2 public hearings, I think one in 2020, one in 2021, that had to be continued because we didn't have a quorum. So, and that creates some reposting and new notices and things like that. So it has happened before, and maybe this is the time to consider, broadening. I think the reason, my guess is, from the history of some of the staff, is a reason they required an ex officio on the mayor is because they couldn't fill the planning commission.
And my personal opinion is I like to hear more from the public. And so I would like, the Madam Mayor to stay on, but I don't necessarily know that we need another trustee on there. And this gives us, the opportunity to broaden that with more community members. And that's just my personal opinion. I do like the alternate, but, I also like giving the public a little bit more, reach out and.
and that was the concern from our new board, that by you having a board member on, you're taking that away from the community. And I hadn't heard that before, but I was very open to that suggestion of changing our code. And what's,
It's an ordinance, and it's an ordinance, it could be adopted by emergency if it's for public health and safety, and there's a reason to do that. And of course, you can, as a planning commission, recommend that. If you feel that this is the time to do that. Like I said, we have struggled to fill this position, but maybe there's enough interest in the developments that are going on that this is the time to make that move.
and then can I ask you the concept of the alternate? They would still be involved, get the packets every month?
An
And-
alternate would, yes.
Yeah, just to be ready to step in.
And because you are a statutory town, we may have to contact the attorney about the alternate period, whereas Durango is a home rule
Yeah.
municipality.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't know that answer.
So we could make a recommendation to the board to consider having an alternate?
You
Or-
can make any type of recommendation you would like, as long as we understand what we're forwarding on to them, whether it's removing the ex officio. Keep in mind, the ex officio and the mayor are gonna see this whole presentation again.
It's
A
kind
second
of,
time.
yeah.
Yeah,
Because I've served on that as on the board and being on the planning commission, and it's kind of like you get the same information twice, and I would feel more comfortable getting somebody else's perspective to bring to the board, because I think both people, could bring that. We have a lifetime resident, and we have, someone that has pretty good credentials, so.
So if I was kind of hearing what you're saying, and I'm not gonna put words in your mouth, you could make a recommendation that the planning commission is considering both candidates as a member to fill a vacancy, with the recommendation that the board consider changing the ordinance to remove the ex officio and add a sixth member from the public.
I like that direction, honestly.
Mr. Gadd?
I like that.
And, I can certainly be here to relay information to the board or clarify anything, so.
I'd entertain a motion.
What Katie said.
Yeah, I think we just have to make a recommendation, and I think that's direction for.
It is just a recommendation.
I'm good with that recommendation.
Okay, so we are considering both candidates with the consideration that we would like to have the ex officio member dissolved?
Removed.
Yeah.
And add a sixth commissioner,
Community member.
Community.
community
Community
member.
member.
Yeah, I kind of wrote what Katie said. PC would like to consider both candidates and therefore ask the board to remove the ex officio and appoint both members of the public to the PC, and therefore change the land use code through ordinance. Something like that.
I'm good with that.
Second.
So I guess we have some direction moving forward.
That's correct.
All right.
You may want to vote on it.
Roll
on your
call, please.
recommendation.
Ms. Rachel?
Sorry. I'm just trying to keep up. Vice Chairperson Gadd,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Shea Heidinger,
Yes.
Mayor Tarkington,
Yes.
Chairperson Nyberg.
Yes.
All in favor.
Cash, did you hear that? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think so. You guys kind of cut out, but I think I got the gist. You're on.
So we'll let you guys both know, or you can attend next week's board meeting where we're gonna continue this discussion with the board and see how that plays out.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Cash. All right. Moving on to number 4, discussion, Community Development and Department Report.
Yeah, so I did give this report to the board last week, but right now FEMA's going through some updates. FEMA is our federal emergency management agency, and they oversee our flood insurance rate maps and our flood insurance studies, which our town does adopt when they make changes to those. And so they're right now in the public process to get comments or any, I would say, if you have an issue with your property and how it's being designated right now, you can work with them to prove that it's incorrect. Usually you have to have an engineer to do that. But so they're in this public review process right now. The county did actually put together a nice website, which I did put down below, La Plata County GIS, of what the proposed new firm maps look like. And staff's quick review of Bayfield. Our 100-year floodplains seem to have decreased in size, which is good for property owners who may have had higher flood insurance rates over the past years, as well as anybody who might want to be developing in areas. Your restrictions are reduced. But the floodway, which no development's allowed in, seems to have stayed consistent with what it was previously. There were some minor changes from what I saw. So I think overall a good thing for our community. And so I did put the information down if anybody wants to get more information on that process. From my understanding is we'll probably see some more information come out this summer of when they're going to be adopting the new maps. And then I would be bringing it to the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees to change our land use code to reflect the new adopted maps from FEMA. And then the second thing is stormwater, so similar, and I kind of hinted at this with HOAs, but we're going to be doing some stormwater outreach. We're working with SGM, our town engineers, to help us come up with some best management practices that we can pass on to HOAs in terms of how to maintain and with annual or however long the maintenance needs to go, or however often the maintenance needs to occur for stormwater ponds that are existing. So again, trying to do that outreach with the HOAs as well as homeowners. There's a lot of stormwater ditches on existing lots as well as swells between properties, and some homeowners put sheds there, or they regrade and not really understanding that they're impacting possibly drainage issues upstream from them. And so we just want to put out some outreach so that, or education pieces. So I'd say those will be coming out probably in some of our newsletters, as well as reaching out to HOAs. So just wanted to give you that heads up so you don't hear from a concerned citizen or HOA that the town is approaching them about their stormwater issues.
Thank you, ma'am. 4B, May 31st, 2022, 6:30 p.m. Board of Trustee Planning Commission Joint Work Session.
So right now, right now I don't have any planning commission items in May. So everything's kind of been piled up, and now we're going to have a little break. And so I think a couple things we want to talk about. We do want to do a joint study session with the new Board of Trustees to talk about land use issues, particularly like we're looking at some amendments to our comprehensive plan and land use code. And so just want to have that discussion with all the development that we've been seeing, getting everybody together. But also wanting to talk to the Planning Commission about whether there's some items you would like to discuss at a May meeting, or do you want to just not have our regular May meeting and just do the study session with the Board of Trustees. So I just wanted to get your input on what your thoughts are for May, since we don't have any items for the Planning Commission.
You will have to have a special meeting or a regular meeting that you've rescheduled to May 31st so that you can approve the minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, then I think we just bump it to the 31st.
I'm good with that.
Yes.
Okay.
And then 4E, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All right, and thank you guys for all coming. We are. Thank you.
They fled.
They were all kind of looking at us like, we're gonna
Can't
forward.
look at that.
And we're gonna
That's
move
insane.
forward. I really like her. She's awesome.
Jason, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, very nice.
Thank you.
Welcome to Bayfield.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you a lot more. Oh, yeah, it's,
If you guys don't need these, I'm gonna reuse them for the board,
I'll just keep mine in my bag.
but you can always leave them up there. If you want them, you can keep them, but if you don't, I'll reuse them.
Bayfield.
Bayfield.
I'm gonna Bayfile them.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Donna can't hear me, so I wouldn't
Glad we
expect
didn't have to
anything
make that
different.
decision between the two of those. What's that?
Donna can't hear me, but I wouldn't expect anything different.
Have a good night.
You too.
Good night.
We'll see you.
Yeah. Well, I'll just put an ordinance together, and I'll talk to Michael. I think, I kind of think the alternate is a good idea, but maybe we at least get community members. I don't, yeah.
That's what I was wondering, if we can also add.
Yeah, if he was the alternate and you couldn't make it, then he could fill in, because he's still an ex officio.
Right. I like that.
But the code still needs to be updated.
Yeah, I just didn't want to like lose. Like, it's,
People that were interested.
Oh,
yeah, it's really.
Heavens, no.
I know, I'm like.
I'm like, could we increase to 9 and still be like?
Emergency.
Well, I know Katie had talked about it, but I can't see her, so I'm like.
The mayor said, if she can't see me, I'm in trouble.
So I was like, I'm just gonna bring it up.
Yeah.
What, do you have to amend the bylaws to?
Well, the bylaws can be amended, but it's not necessarily a code. So the planning commission at the May 31st meeting, if the board goes ahead and adopts a code, then they need to just change their bylaws. I always say bylaws are just kind of, yeah, they're just kind of good policy for them to know what to do. I mean, they